What careers or jobs most attract psychopaths? I work in the industry from the factory side. And while I won't pretend that there isn't a higher percentage of awful people who sell cars, there are a lot more good ones than you think. Someone who's been selling for a while, especially for an affiliated dealership rather than for a random used car lot, should understand that treating your customer right and fairly will ultimately make you more money because they'll come back to you for the next car they buy. They're also competitive. And you can use that to your advantage. Unless you're in an extreme circumstance. You don't have to buy that day. Go shop around. And tell other dealers the offers they made you to see if they'll beat it. Also, try to buy in the last week of the month. Manufacturers pay a lot of money to dealers as rewards for hitting sales objectives. And some dealers rely on that money to pay staff and keep the lights on. If you've got a dealer who's close, but not hitting their objective in the last couple days of the month, they might be willing to knock a couple hundred extra off the sale price to get over the finish line. I find those often in HR are not people that should be in HR. HR, in my experience, tends to be run by the sorts of people who threw parties in high school specifically so they could pointedly not invite certain people. Little known field that is rife with psychopathy: public accounting. Fuck public accounting. Get a degree in accounting. Potentially a master's. Pass 4 of the hardest professional exams out there. And become a CPA to work 70 hours weeks from Jan-April while being paid like $13 an hour after dividing your weekly pay by hours worked. All while receiving daily emails about maintaining work-life balance. Everyone pretends like working 14+ hour days back to back is totally acceptable. Actually 16 hours, but you only build 14, so that's all they care about. I once told my senior that I needed a mental break after she tried giving me work at 10:30 PM on a Thursday night after billing 56 hours in 4 days. And then proceeded to be chewed out by that senior and a manager. I'm seriously getting stressed out just writing this. I did 2 busy seasons in public accounting. And the people that succeed at these places are truly soulless. Also, roughly 80% of public accountants are alcoholics who think getting wasted is a hobby personality trait. These corporations literally spend billions of dollars to trick college students into thinking that sacrificing your life expectancy for them is the only way to be successful in life. My advice to accounting students: don't drink the Kool-Aid. There's been a study on this. It included corporate executives but also surgeons and chefs, both of whose work tends not to require not much actual socialization. Or at least only with subordinates. Not customers who have to be greeted pleasantly. Chefs. I have worked in high-end kitchens and can confirm this. Chefs are f-king monsters, and I've genuinely wished death on every single one I've ever worked for while working under them. Afterwards I always come to realize and remember that it's almost necessary in their line of work. Still though, truly some of the worst people I've ever met. John Ronson wrote a fantastic book, The Psychopath Test. He interviewed people who created and used the test, as well as many psychopaths. Psychopaths in his book ranged from imprisoned murderers to very wealthy CEOs. My uncle is a non-violent psychopath. He was a very successful stockbroker. Retired at 50. Has a house that overlooks the beach where they shot Baywatch. Has never helped a single person in his family. Only helps people strangers he can leverage into more social status. One of the most miserable people I've ever met in my whole life. He has no remorse for anything he says to anyone and can change from being a fun guy to a DCK at the drop of a hat. I think statistically it's surgeons and CEOs. Worked with many a surgeon. We used to wonder about some of them. Especially the one who worked with some of the assistants for 10+ years and didn't know their names. This guy would walk through the halls and not really even acknowledge your presence. He truly didn't care about others. His motto was pain is the patient's problem. Sales. It's known that psychopaths excel in sales because they do whatever they can to get ahead. Learned about it in psych in my undergrad and it always stuck with me. Edit. I've worked sales jobs myself. So I'm not judging anyone at all. I am just relaying information I recalled from my undergrad. I sell cars. I've worked sales for the last half decade or so. Sales attracts all sorts of people. It has a very low entry bar, but a pretty steep curve as far as success goes. I think most people in the business are fairly decent. Normal folks. However, with that said, there are always crazies. Always. And they do tend to excel. It's really funny as a coworker. Because you know the person on a deeper level. From spending so much time with them. You wonder why the FCK do people eat this guy's shit up? And it feels weird to you. But they have this ability to be very, very likable on a surface level. And it works. Homeowners Association President. One of my favorite anecdotes. Dennis Rader, a notorious serial killer known as BTK, stopped committing murders after he got a job enforcing HOA rules. Because he got as much satisfaction harassing people over pretty bullshit as he did from torturing and murdering his victims. Paparazzi. If it's any consolation, the paparazzi doesn't really make the big bucks the way they used to 15 years ago. Back then they could make a lot of money chasing Britney Spears around until she had a mental breakdown. Nowadays, thanks to social media, celebrities can broadcast their lives in a way that they see fit. So it's not profitable to stalk them anymore. Most celebrity candid shots that you've seen in the past few years were staged, not secretly taken by paparazzi. Serial killers seem to like positions of authority but almost always have sexual assault battery priors, so they often end up as rent-a-cops and security guards. I 100% believe this. I believed one of my husband's friends was a psycho. He was so creepy, and when you made him angry he would walk around with a knife out. He's a security guard. He tried to go in the military but couldn't pass the second week of boot. Most clinical psychopaths, over 30 on the checklist, are actually so impulsive and out of control that they either don't have jobs because they're in prison right now, or they bounce from job to job either quitting or getting fired fast. A prominent trait of psychopathy is actually an inability to hold down jobs for long periods of time. People might say surgeons or CEOs. That psychopathic trait is not full-blown psychopaths. If you know about clinical diagnosis, surely you also know that psychopathy is not a diagnosis. It's antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. And it's a spectrum disorder. There's no full-blown psychopath or equivalent designation. Lawyers, CEOs, surgeons and civil servants, from what I've read, have some of the higher rates. For lawyers, the way you can tell between those who were born with no soul and those whose soul has been crushed out of them by the industry is that the former smile. Construction. As a construction worker, I have met literally the worst human beings I've ever met while in the trades. One guy, because I quit working for a shitty company, legit said he should pay me and X200B. Like, okay bud. Fucking weirdo. Some. Not all. But yeah. I totally believe it. My sister very briefly dated a guy who was in construction. He was serious when he told my sister that his version of fishing was dropping a stick of dynamite in the water and watching the fish float to the surface. He stayed over our house for a family party and joked to me, "Yeah, better close your door tonight or I'll come get ya." Right. That's the best thing to say to your new girlfriend's little sister. Oh. The weirdest part was when he flipped out when my sister wore a pair of open-toe heels for their date. Then he threatened to burn down our house after she made a joke about how he didn't like her shoes. The guy definitely had screws loose. Crossing guards. Always telling you what to do and what not to do and when to do it. The F-king entitlement these people have. One career that doesn't immediately come to mind but makes a ton of sense when you think about it is charity worker. Especially if you get to management. What do psychopaths want? To get away with abusing power over others. What better way to do that than to surround yourself with powerless people who desperately need whatever the charity is providing? And typical charity workers that are extremely helpful. Caring people who are most inclined to want to see the good in others. I have a friend with PTSD from being abused by his boss and being forced to witness his boss abuse the people who needed the charity while working at a non-profit. and his therapist told him his story is surprisingly common. Politics. I used to believe this, but I respectfully disagree after a 10-year and ongoing political background. There are sociopaths and narcissists. Yes. But you are going to be dealing with a lot of things that a narcissist or a sociopath simply cannot handle. Working tons of hours. Having people hate you that don't even know you. People treating you like crap because they don't agree with your political opinions. Extremely low wages. Then you have things like door knocking or canvassing. Phone banks. A lot of petty things that until you're a congressman you're going to have to do, and narcissists simply don't want to do these things. The police military. I was army infantry and we had some fucking nuts in my unit. Big army only cares about numbers. You can be a bad game of Call of Duty away from going on a machete rampage, and as long as you are deployable and all green on readiness you will be pushed through. I don't know that it attracts psychopaths, but psychopaths make excellent first responders and they're far less likely to freak the FCK out in an emergency or get stuck helping the one who screams loudest. Psychopaths aren't necessarily maladjusted. In theory. We generally only hear about what info we get from studying in jails, so I was a paramedic. Honestly, there were some psychopaths and they were also super negligent. I had the luck of being trained by two of them at different times. She burned me with cigarettes and would scream at me and make fun of patients. Another guy I was trained by was very competent but lacked any empathy, and patients would get scared around him. His partner was this horrible woman who also lacked empathy. The three of us got a special award and I was mad because my trainers had mocked this patient to the point where she didn't want to get to the hospital. She would have died, and I convinced her to go. I refused to go to the award ceremony because I hated those two so much. Then my ex worked with this psycho lady who would purposely put heroin addicts in withdrawal for fun, even if they weren't overdosing. She wound hide an IM injection syringe of Narcan and stabbed them. One guy started crying and said, "You're purposely trying to make me sick," and she jabbed him anyway. One medic told me a story where another medic peed on a homeless woman. My supervisor smacked a homeless guy so hard a tooth fell out. And a former friend of mine bragged about cracking the orbital socket of another homeless person. A lie, but why brag about this? Close bracket. Psychopaths usually have a hard time holding a job due to a lack of empathy and inability to alter their behavior or dial it back enough to keep one. They seek out positions that allow or encourage direct physical harm towards others, or where such acts can be routinely hidden. Corrections jobs allowing direct contact with inmates. Law enforcement. Dedicated combat jobs in the military. The medical field. Animal control. All necessary jobs where blood and death are routine. Most people mistakenly equate psychopathy with sociopathy. A successful sociopath can be looked at as a psychopath with more control. They don't directly harm others but harness their lack of empathy. Their harm is less immediately physical and more socially and economically oriented. Corporate executives. Politicians. Lawyers and the like. All necessary jobs where not giving a damn about others is a valuable attribute. Nurses. I'm not sure if it's because people just want the pay or what, but nurses can be so evil. Like the ones beating on old people and shit. I was a nurse aide for 6 years in a hospital and can verify that the majority are really exploitive and mean to aides. In training, they said there was a common saying amongst nurses that they eat their young, which was bizarre to hear and counter to the supposed nature of nursing. However, the majority, including the meanest, generally genuinely try to care for the patients. I'm an actual psychopath and I've always loved business, finance, the tech industry, and I always seek out the highest paying positions. Money is more important to me than recognition, fame, or getting credit for my own work. I want you guys to know that not all psychopaths are evil or looking to hurt people. I'm actually very generous with friends, family, and charity. I have also done a lot of high quality pro bono work, where I charge victims of abuse absolutely nothing for my higher level expertise and time. My worst quality is that I'm lazy and selfish. But I have never hurt an animal or a person. I've never been in a fight with anyone where things got physical. I follow rules because it's more annoying to get caught breaking them than it is to just deal with the hassle of following them to begin with. For example, I stop at yellow lights. I always follow the speed limits. I let people merge. And I stop for 3 seconds at stop signs. Even when the street is empty. When I'm upset with someone, I'm more likely to lash out in passive-aggressive ways. Withhold affection and generosity. Or stop speaking to the person entirely and cut them out of my life. I'm not really petty or revenge-seeking. I'm more of a forget-it-and-move-on person. This is actually one of the reasons I refuse to enter into a new monogamous relationship. I already know my lack of empathy and my low tolerance of frustration will sabotage that relationship. I need lots of free time and space in my life because I love doing fun things and not much else. This goes back to how selfish and lazy I am. The more work I have to do, the less happy I am. Edit. Typos. Insurance claim officers. My mum used to work closely with these people. And oh man. The shitty some of them would tell her in confidence regarding clients was repulsive. One that really stood out was an earthquake damage claims officer who outright enjoyed denying people compensation for their damaged homes and possessions. Mum could tell he thrived off the control he held over these poor people looking for help. He must have ruined dozens of lives throughout our city's earthquake recovery. I'm going into the aerospace industry as an engineer soon, and I feel like a lot of those engineers who work for defense companies building weapons that kill people are just different. I've had a number of interviews with defense industry people, and every time the interviewer puts me off with the ways they describe their work building bombs and missiles and shit that definitely blow up human beings. Maybe it's the way they always frame it as supporting the warfighter and how their products are innovative kill chain technologies and shit. I would bet money that the defense industry has a measurably higher rate of psychopaths. Overseas military contractors. I have worked with people that I swear had bodies in their basements or people tied up down there. Seems legit. Anyone who willingly enters a combat zone with no patriotic motivations either really loves money or really loves killing. Train people. Man. Train workers are very unique. I work in the entertainment industry and frequently work on locomotive-based events. I've worked with both public and private railroads across the US. And have found common characteristics with nearly every train worker I've come across. Narcissism. Homophobia. Racism. Sexism. Impulsive tendencies. Need for power. Difficulty controlling their anger. Short fuses. In many cases, downright sadistic. It sometimes feels like they are looking for an opportunity to freak out on people to assert authority and masculinity. Of course, there are exceptions to this trend, but it's pretty rare, in my experience. Psychopathia. I suffer from antisocial personality disorder. I actually live a pretty normal life for the most part. Previously I've worked in hospitality as an events manager and bar and restaurant manager. I now do a job where I am alone 99% of the time, and truth be told it's much better for me. Not that I had any issues before, but faking it every day and lying to people becomes tiring sometimes. No one ever found out I was mentally ill. But pretty much every interaction I had as an employee-customer relationship and even my fellow staff was faked. Middle management. They're incompetent jerk-offs that can't make it to actual positions of power. They sit and tread in their little puddle of victory. They're generally useless and have no real use other than being a toilet for upper management. Homeopathic medicine requires a very low degree of empathy with a higher level of charisma and self-belief to hide this fact. Lots of other alternative health and wellness industries, particularly things like yoga and mindfulness, which have elements that tend towards pyramid schemes, have a bit of psychopath in them. Granted, there are many non-exploitative practitioners too. Unlike homeopathy, which is 100% scam. Security guards. Power without passing police officer mental health tests. Quite a few therapists, I would guess. The only two people I know who studied psychology at university were both high on the psychopath spectrum. I avoided them as much as possible because they were nuts.